Welcome back to Exploration Crochet. I'm your host, Riri, and today we're taking a journey through time. A journey that shows how crochet, the new kid among thread crafts, learned from its older cousins, crossed oceans and cultures, and became one of the most universal, welcoming forms of making on the planet. Crochet is often framed as cozy and domestic, and yes, that's part of the story. But the truth is so much bigger. Crochet has traveled continents, carried families through hard times, celebrated joy and identity, and reinvented itself again and again. What makes crochet remarkable isn't just the stitches, it's how accessible and adaptable they are. Wherever people had yarn and a hook, or could improvise one, crochet found a home. It's one of the most democratic of crafts, welcoming, portable, and shareable. To appreciate crochet's role, though, we have to start way before crochet, with the long lineage of thread crafts that came first. Then we'll watch crochet enter the scene and see how it absorbed influences and served communities from every class and culture. When crochet came on the scene, it came to make friends. So before we start, here's a brief prologue so I can introduce you to crochet's much older cousins. And if you want a little more in-depth description with pictures, please check out my companion blog at explorationcrochet.com. I'll leave a link in the description. Long before anyone said the word crochet, humans were experimenting with string. Tens of thousands of years ago, people twisted plant fibers into cordage, one of humanity's earliest technologies. From there, string turned into nets for fishing and carrying, into woven baskets and mats, and eventually into loom-woven cloth. Other ingenious methods included sprang, which is interlocking warp threads to make stretchy net-like fabric, think hairnet, nawl binding, which was an ancient looping technique that predates knitting, arriving by the medieval period, followed by macrame, bobbin lace, tatting, tambour embroidery. Now this involved a hooked needle making chain stitches on fabric. And that is the hinge where we begin to turn toward crochet. It was followed by what was called shepherd knitting, which was worked with what was referred to as a shepherd's hook, and I think you can see where things are going from here. So that's the family. Again, check out my blog at Exploration Crochet if you want a little more information and pictures. But for now, let's talk about the new kid on the block, crochet. The motion at the heart of crochet, pulling one loop through another, appears across cultures long before the word crochet surfaces. Scholars point to several likely influences: looped adornments in part of South America, fully looped doll work in China, and techniques that traveled along Arabian trade routes into the Mediterranean. Treat these as currents feeding a river rather than one definitive source. Across Asia and the Middle East, and then in Europe, artisans practiced tambour embroidery, a small hooked tool making rapid chain stitches on fabric. Tambour isn't crochet, but it supplies both the tool and the idea. Crochet begins the moment the hook leaves the fabric and keeps chaining in open air. Early English references describe garments made with a shepherd's hook, a simple curved tool used to loop wool into dense, sturdy fabric. This shepherd's knitting label shows hook work already active among rural makers before crochet becomes the standard term. It's the practical on-ramp from tambour hooked motion to free loop fabric. In 1823, the Dutch magazine Penelope published clear, modern-style crochet directions, including a color plate of silk purses. Patterns ranged from open mesh to mixed meshes to dense fabric with stitches that mapped directly to US single, UK double crochet. Editors even mention a tambour needle, evidence of a moment when tambour and free loop crochet still overlapped. By the early 1830s, publications illustrate the shepherd's hook and recommend it for coarser yarn, while the French term crochet, a diminutive of crook from a Germanic Norse root, also seen in English, gains ground as the umbrella term in the English needlework press. In German-speaking sources, the craft appears as Hockarbeit, from Haken for hook. This reinforces identity as a distinct, hooked technique rather than shepherd's knitting. English language handbooks describe crochet needles, also called shepherd's hooks, made of steel, ivory, or boxwood, and sold in multiple sizes. Writers of the decade note that a hooked species of knitting, long associated with Scottish peasants, was swiftly becoming a fashionable ornamental art across Britain and beyond. In short, the tool set is standardized, the name is fixed, and adoption is fast. By the mid-1800s, in parlors from magazine patterns, fine thread crochet yields collars, cuffs, and doilies. In kitchens and cottages, affordable yarn becomes shawls, hats, and blankets. Warm, durable, loom-free. From the outset, crochet bridges luxury and necessity. And what does this show? Crochet is a synthesis craft, mechanically born from tambour hook, culturally nourished by multiple looped traditions, and socially carried forward by shepherd's knitting, which proves free loop hooking was useful before it was fashionable. So, once the hook left the fabric and the French name crystallized its identity, the youngest member of the threadcraft family, just over 200 years ago, arrived and spread with remarkable speed. One of history's darkest chapters is the Great Irish Famine of the 1840s. With potato crops failing, families turned to crochet lace for famine relief. Schools to teach crocheting were started, teachers were trained and sent across Ireland to teach the craft. Entire households stitched by candlelight, and their lace traveled to English and continental markets. The same motifs that adorned aristocratic collars were quite literally food on the table for the people who made them. Crochet revealed a dual identity with painful clarity. Luxury for some, lifeline for others. Crochet arrived with Irish immigrants and soon set beside quilting and knitting in American homes. In the South, however, under slavery, materials shaped making, and with hooks and yarn harder to obtain, African Americans relied on quilting and hand sewing with fabric scraps. After emancipation, as department stores and mail-order catalogs widened access to tools and materials, crochet joined those established practices in Black households and women's magazines. In Latin America and the Caribbean, crochet rooted in local aesthetics. Ganchillo in Mexico and Central America produced bold, floral folk art. In the Caribbean, crochet fused with festival culture, brightening carnival wear and ceremony. Crochet was global. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, crochet was a household language. Magazines published patterns for doilies, tablecloths, curtains, blankets. Crochet filled wedding trousseaux and baby layettes. It stacked into hope chests and became family heirlooms. Even the humblest bedspread displayed design choices and skill, a quiet gallery of a maker's taste and cultural memory. In wartime, crochet turned to service. During the World Wars, makers produced socks, gloves, balaclavas, and comfort goods for soldiers and refugees. Crochet boosted morale on the home front and knit communities together. No, crochet wasn't used to carry hidden spy messages, as has been said about its elder cousin knitting due to its binary nature. But in Eastern Europe, pineapple, star, and floral medallions became national staples on altar cloths and table runners, sustaining identity through upheaval. Crochet's essence paired creativity and use. Then, the counterculture years blew the doors off. The Granny Square erupted, a modular, colorful rebellion against mass-manufactured sameness. Crochet hit vests, ponchos, bikinis, bags, and at the same time, grandmothers kept hooking afghans, baby sets, and toilet roll covers with doll heads. The very same motif could be radical fashion and home comfort, depending upon who wore it and why. Crochet spans generations, classes, and cultures without breaking a single sweat. And across the Pacific, crochet blossomed into something new. In post-war Japan, small crocheted dolls and animals steeped in kawaii aesthetics. Amigurumi. In the 1970s, that playful soft sculpture took shape. By the 2000s, it had swept the world online. Crochet wasn't just fabric anymore. It was character. It was emotion. It was story. By the 1980s and 90s, crochet had taken a step back from its groovy 70s, but it still wore many hats. In communities, it lived alongside quilting and knitting as intergenerational tradition. Globally, it spoke bright cultural dialects. Fashion rediscovered crochet's texture on couture runways, and politically, crochet became identity work. Women's groups fundraised with it. Feminist collectives reclaimed it as serious art. Libraries kept it as community practice. The old woman's work dismissal fell away. Crochet stood as cultural work, tending memories, asserting presence, claiming joy. Then the internet took crochet into the global village square. In the 2000s, on YouTube, millions learned their first chain. On Instagram and TikTok, styles flipped from cozy to couture overnight. Patterns jumped borders and languages, while stitch-alongs, hashtags, and maker groups made crochet social, immediate, and gloriously diverse. Crochet also found new partners in science and math. Makers used simple increases, decreases, and repeats to model complex forms, proof that a hook and yarn can make algorithms tangible. And yeah, I know, and it is coming. I am going to do a deep dive into hyperbolic crochet in the future. But today, crochet is everywhere. On Paris and Milan runways, in indigenous markets across the Americas, in Asian craft collectives. And who crochets? Everyone. Young and old, rural and urban, across every gender and culture. Crochet has become a shared language for making, inclusive by design. Crochet is the youngest of the big thread crafts, a late arrival that learned from others. It thrives because it's accessible, one hook, one ball of yarn, that's enough to begin. It's inexpensive, portable, and forgiving. Drop your loop, keep going. No loom, no fleet of bobbins, just you and your stitches. It's adaptable. Crochet morphs effortlessly. Airy lace, bold geometrics, floral medallions, chunky sculptural shapes, 3D toys, seamless garments. It absorbs cultural motifs and modern aesthetics without losing its voice. And community. Crochet is easy to teach and quick to share. A grandmother at the kitchen table, a neighbor on a stoop, a stranger on YouTube. The knowledge passes along like a song. That's why crochet crosses class and culture so smoothly. Its barrier to entry is low, and its ceiling for creativity, sky high. So looking back across the centuries, we can see crochet as a companion to human society, providing a means of survival in lean times, beauty in times of celebration, a good shake when society needs it, and comfort when life aches. It's not the property of one culture, one class, or one era. Crochet is survival, beauty, resistance, and joy. And it's also a listener. Crochet listened to older crafts, net and basket making, apparel, lace, home decor, and answered, I can do that. I can do you plus something new. So the next time you pick up a hook and yarn, remember, you're joining a conversation that began with the first twisted strands of fiber. You're part of a global story that started just over 200 years ago and still welcomes new verses, loop by loop, stitch by stitch. I'm Riri, and this has been Exploration Crochet. Thank you for traveling through time with me. And until we meet again, remember, crochet may be the new kid on the block, but it has always loved making new friends. And there's always room for one more in the circle. Thanks for listening.